The mahogany telescope sat there on the lawyer's desk, its brass fittings tarnished with age, while my brother Marcus counted zeros on his inheritance check. $23 million. That's what 30 years of being the golden child had earned him. Me? I got Dad's worthless junk from the attic. His exact words from the will, read aloud in front of 17 family members who all tried to hide their smirks behind tissues they pretended to dab at dry eyes. I picked up the telescope, feeling its surprising weight in my hands. Through the lens, I caught Marcus's reflection, that same superior smile he'd worn since we were kids, the one that said I was nothing more than the family disappointment who'd never amount to anything. If you've ever been the invisible one, the one everyone writes off before you even get a chance to prove yourself, then you know exactly how this moment felt. But sometimes the most valuable things come in packages nobody else bothers to unwrap. Before I tell you what that telescope revealed, let me take you back to where this all started. My name is Elena, and for 24 years, I was the shadow in the Harrison family portrait. Always there, never quite seen. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, there were unspoken rules about who mattered and who didn't. Marcus was the heir apparent from the moment he could walk. Firstborn son, Harvard-bound since kindergarten, groomed to take over Harrison Industries like it was his birthright. And me? I was the oops baby, born 7 years after Marcus when my parents thought they were done having children. Dad never quite forgave me for that, as if I'd chosen to disrupt his perfectly planned life. The hierarchy in our house was carved in stone. Marcus got the corner bedroom with the bay windows overlooking the Sound. I got the converted storage room next to the servants' quarters. Marcus got driving lessons in Dad's Bentley on his 16th birthday. I got a bus pass and a lecture about not being materialistic. Marcus's report cards were framed in Dad's study. Mine were glanced at and forgotten, even when they were better than his, which they often were. But the real difference wasn't in the things. It was in the way Dad looked at us. When Marcus walked into a room, Dad's face would light up like someone had flipped a switch. His whole body would turn toward his son, eager to hear about his day, his thoughts, his plans. When I walked in, Dad's eyes would slide past me like I was furniture. On the rare occasions he did acknowledge me, it was usually to point out what I was doing wrong. "Elena, must you slouch like that? You'll never find a husband with posture like a question mark. Elena, why can't you be more like your brother? He understands what it means to be a Harrison. Elena, I don't care if you got into Yale. We're not wasting money on college for you. Women in this family don't need degrees." That last one had been the breaking point. I was 18, holding my acceptance letter with shaking hands, watching my future crumble while Marcus smirked from his seat at Dad's right hand. Mom sat silent as always, her face a perfect mask of nothing. She'd learned long ago that contradicting Dad meant consequences, and she valued her comfort more than her daughter's dreams. So, I did what Dad never expected. I left. Got a job waiting tables at a diner in New Haven, enrolled in community college part-time, and slowly, painfully, clawed my way through an education. It took me 6 years instead of 4, but I did it. Bachelor's degree in astronomy, of all things. Dad had laughed when he heard. Astronomy? What are you going to do? Wish on stars for a living? The family dinners I was obligated to attend were exercises in endurance. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Easter, I'd sit at that long mahogany table and listen to Marcus regale everyone with stories of his business conquests, his luxury vacations, his latest promotion at Harrison Industries. And then someone would remember I existed and ask that dreaded question. "So, Elena, what are you up to these days?" Before I could answer, Marcus would jump in. "Oh, Elena's still playing with telescopes. She works at some little planetarium, don't you, sis? Showing field trips to school kids. Very quaint." The word quaint in Marcus's mouth was like acid. He had a gift for making anything I did sound small and pathetic. The fact that I was actually the assistant director of the Morrison Planetarium, that I'd published 3 papers on exoplanet detection, that I was happy, none of that mattered. In the Harrison family narrative, I was the failure, and that story was set in stone. Or so I thought. Dad's death came suddenly. Heart attack at his desk, the doctor said. Fitting, really. He died doing what he loved most, making money. The funeral was a who's who of Connecticut society, everyone coming to pay respects to the great Robert Harrison, captain of industry, philanthropist, pillar of the community. I stood in the receiving line next to Marcus and Mom, shaking hands with people who looked through me to get to my brother, the new head of Harrison Industries. The will reading was scheduled for exactly 1 week after the funeral. Dad would have appreciated the efficiency. No time for excessive mourning when there was wealth to distribute. The family lawyer, Mr. Whitman, had called to make sure I would attend. "Your presence is specifically required, Miss Harrison. Your father was very clear about that." I almost didn't go. What was the point? We all knew how this would play out. Marcus would get everything that mattered: the company, the houses, the investments. Mom would get enough to maintain her lifestyle. Various cousins and business partners would get their little pieces. And I would get whatever crumb Dad thought would be most insulting. But something made me show up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that last pathetic hope that Dad might have seen me, really seen me, even once. Or maybe I just wanted to watch Marcus try to pretend he was sad while calculating his net worth. The lawyer's office was exactly what you'd expect, all dark wood and leather, designed to whisper old money to anyone who walked in. The family was already assembled when I arrived, having taken the train from New Haven because my 12-year-old Honda had finally given up the ghost the week before. Aunt Patricia looked at my off-the-rack dress with barely concealed disdain. Cousin Jeffrey checked his Rolex pointedly, as if my presence was keeping him from something important. Marcus sat in the biggest chair, of course, already playing the patriarch. His wife, Vivian, a blonde skeleton who lived on green juice and Pilates, clutched his arm possessively. She'd always hated me, probably because Marcus had once drunkenly confessed that he used to be jealous of how smart I was. Used to be. Past tense. Before he realized intelligence without money or power was just another form of poverty in our world. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat and began reading. The legal language washed over me, all those whereases and heretofores that dressed up what was essentially a list of who got what. Mom got the house in Martha's Vineyard and a generous monthly allowance. Various cousins got bonds and stock portfolios. Uncle Richard got Dad's wine collection, worth more than most people's houses. And then came the main event. To my son, Marcus Harrison, I leave the bulk of my estate, including my controlling interest in Harrison Industries, the family compound in Greenwich, the apartment in Manhattan, and all associated investment accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. Marcus didn't even try to look surprised. Vivian actually giggled. Someone, I think it was Aunt Patricia, muttered, "Well deserved," just loud enough for everyone to hear. To my daughter, Elena Harrison, Mr. Whitman continued, and I straightened in my chair despite myself. I leave the contents of the attic storage room in the Greenwich house, items which I collected during my youth, but which have no substantial monetary value. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus laughed, actually laughed. The attic junk? Oh, Dad, even in death you knew how to make a point. The rest of the family joined in his amusement, their chuckles ranging from embarrassed to cruel. I felt my face burn, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd had 24 years of practice hiding what I really felt in this family. Mr. Whitman looked uncomfortable. There is a specific item mentioned, an antique telescope that belonged to your paternal grandfather. Your father wanted to ensure you received it. A telescope? Vivian's voice dripped. Condescension. How appropriate. Elena can look at the stars and dream about the life she'll never have. More laughter. Mom studied her manicure. Mr. Whitman shuffled papers, and that's when he brought it out. The telescope that would change everything. It didn't look like much, about 3 feet long when fully extended, made of brass and mahogany that had seen better days. The leather wrapping around the middle was cracked with age. One of the adjustment knobs was slightly bent. Marcus took one look at it and shook his head. Probably worth a few $100s to some antique dealer, though I doubt Elena could even get that for it. She never was good at negotiating. I picked up the telescope, surprised by its weight. It felt solid, substantial in a way that nothing in my life had felt for a very long time. Through the eyepiece, I caught a distorted view of the room. Marcus's smirk, Vivian's sneer, the family's collective dismissal of me warped into something almost comedic. "Is that everything?" I asked Mr. Whitman. He nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't making a scene. "The attic contents can be collected at your convenience. I believe there are some boxes of books, old photographs, various collectibles your father accumulated in his youth." "Junk," Marcus corrected. "Let's call it what it is. Dad's way of saying Elena gets nothing, just like she contributed nothing." I stood up, telescope under my arm. "Thank you, Mr. Whitman. I'll make arrangements to collect everything this weekend." "You're not staying for lunch?" Mom finally spoke, though she didn't look at me. "We have reservations at the club." "I have to get back to work. Some of us can't afford to take extended time off." Marcus snorted. "Work, right. Hey, Elena, if you need money, I could probably find something for you at the company. We always need someone to clean the offices." The family laughed again. I walked out without responding, clutching the telescope like a lifeline. On the train back to New Haven, I examined it more closely. There was an inscription on the brass, so worn with age I could barely make it out. "For those who dare to look beyond, Captain James Harrison, 1782. Captain James Harrison. I knew that name from the family genealogy Mom had commissioned years ago. He was Dad's great-great-great-grandfather, a merchant sailor who'd made the family's first fortune in the spice trade, but that was all I knew. Dad never talked about family history unless it was to remind Marcus of the legacy he was inheriting. That night in my tiny apartment, I set up the telescope on my fire escape. It was surprisingly well preserved for something over 2 centuries old. The lenses were still clear, the focusing mechanism smooth, despite the bent knob. I pointed it at the moon first, adjusting the focus until the craters came into sharp relief. Then I swung it toward the horizon, where the lights of Long Island Sound twinkled in the distance. That's when I noticed something odd. There was another eyepiece, smaller, tucked into a hidden compartment in the telescope's body. When I switched to it, the view changed completely. Instead of magnifying distant objects, it seemed to overlay them with something else. Markings, symbols, like an old map superimposed on the modern landscape. I spent the next 3 days researching Captain James Harrison. The public records were sparse: birth, death, marriage, the basic outline of a successful merchant's life. But in the Yale Library's maritime collection, I found something interesting. A ship's log from 1779, 3 years before the telescope was made. Captain Harrison's ship, the Perpetua, had gone off course during a storm and discovered an uncharted island off the coast of what would later become Connecticut. The log entry was brief. Found land not on any chart. Good harbor, fresh water, stands of oak suitable for ship repair. Have marked the location for future use. Will not report to authorities as taxation would render it worthless for emergency provisions. An unreported island, hidden for over 2 centuries. I felt my heart rate accelerate as I cross-referenced old maps with modern ones, trying to figure out where this island might be. But without exact coordinates, it was like looking for a specific grain of sand on a beach. That weekend, I went to collect my inheritance from the attic. Marcus made sure to be there, of course, lounging in Dad's old study while I climbed the narrow stairs with boxes. "Find any treasures up there?" he called out mockingly. "Maybe Dad hid a penny from 1943. I hear those are worth something." The attic was dusty and cramped, filled with the detritus of decades. Boxes of moldering books, trunks of moth-eaten clothes, furniture covered in sheets like ghosts. I methodically went through everything, partly because I was looking for clues about Captain Harrison, partly because I wanted to annoy Marcus by taking my time. In a leather trunk shoved under the eaves, I found what I was looking for: Captain Harrison's personal effects, including his journal, his sextant, and a leather portfolio of charts. My hands shook as I opened the journal, reading his cramped handwriting by the light of my phone. The island was real. He'd named it Perpetua after his ship and used it as a private supply depot for 15 years. More importantly, he'd claimed it under maritime salvage law and filed the paperwork in his own name, not the company's. The claim was hereditary, passing to the eldest child of each generation. But here was the twist that made me gasp out loud. Captain Harrison had 2 sons. The elder, William, inherited the shipping company. The younger, James Jr., inherited all lands discovered and claimed by personal right. The island had been passed down through the younger line for generations, each heir keeping it secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal its existence. I traced the genealogy in the journal. James Jr. to his daughter Margaret, Margaret to her son Charles, Charles to his son Theodore, Theodore to his daughter, Eleanor, and Eleanor to her son Robert, my father. My father had inherited the island, but the trail went cold there. There was no mention of the island in any of Dad's papers, no hint that he even knew it existed. Had the secret been lost? Had Eleanor never told him? Or had he known and chosen to keep it hidden? I heard Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. Jesus, Elena, how long does it take to grab a few boxes? Some of us have actual lives to get back to. I quickly closed the journal and tucked it into a box, just as Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked around the attic with disgust. I can't believe Dad kept all this crap. I'm having it cleared out next week. Anything you don't take goes to the dump. That's fine. I've got what I need. He watched me struggle with a heavy box, making no move to help. You know, Elena, I almost feel sorry for you. It must be hard, knowing Dad thought so little of you that he literally left you garbage. I set the box down and looked at my brother. Really looked at him for maybe the first time in years. He was soft around the edges now, his college athlete physique buried under expensive suits and business lunches. His hair was thinning, though he tried to hide it with product. And his eyes were afraid. Afraid that someone would figure out he wasn't as smart as Dad, wasn't as capable, was just riding on inherited wealth and connections. You're right, I said. Dad did leave me garbage, but sometimes one person's trash is another person's treasure. Marcus laughed. Treasure? What, you think you're going to find some priceless antique up here? Face it, Elena. You're 24 years old, working at a planetarium, living in a studio apartment. You're nobody. You'll always be nobody. That's what Dad knew, and that's why he left you nothing. I picked up the box again. We'll see. That night, I spread everything out on my apartment floor. The journal, the charts, the telescope with its strange second eyepiece. I worked through the puzzle piece by piece, comparing Captain Harrison's hand-drawn maps with modern satellite images, using the telescope's overlay function to match landmarks that had survived 2 centuries of development. At 3 a.m, I found it. The island was real, and it was hiding in plain sight. What looked like a small peninsula on modern maps was actually an island, connected to the mainland by a narrow sandbar that was only exposed at low tide. The area was marked as a nature preserve, undevelopable wetlands. But according to Captain Harrison's claim, properly filed and never rescinded, it belonged to his heirs. It belonged to me. I barely slept for the next week. I spent every free moment researching property law, maritime claims, inheritance rights. I hired a lawyer with my savings, a young woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in property disputes and had a reputation for taking on impossible cases. This is fascinating, Sarah said, reviewing the documents I'd assembled. The claim appears to be valid. The island was never sold, never transferred, never reported to any government authority. It exists in a legal blind spot, and according to this genealogy, you're the rightful heir. But wouldn't it go to Marcus? He's the eldest. Sarah smiled. That's the beautiful part. Your father's will specifically left Marcus the monetary estate and the company. Everything else, and I quote, items which have no substantial monetary value, went to you. At the time of the will's writing, the island had no substantial monetary value because no one knew it existed. Your father, intentionally or not, left you the island. So what's it worth? Sarah pulled up some files on her laptop. That's where it gets interesting. The island is approximately 47 acres. It's in a prime location, sheltered harbor, beautiful views. The nature preserve designation actually increases its value because it means the surrounding area can't be developed, ensuring privacy. Conservative estimate, $15 million. But if marketed to the right buyer, someone looking for a private island close to New York City, it could go for much more. $15 million, minimum. I sat back in my chair, feeling dizzy. What do I do now? We file the claim officially, make it public record, and then... Sarah grinned. Then we wait for the fireworks. The claim was filed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Marcus was calling me, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. What the hell is this, Elena? Some kind of joke? What's what? I asked innocently. This claim, this island. Our lawyer says you're claiming to own some island worth millions. Oh, that. Yes, it was in Dad's things. The telescope pointed right to it. Amazing how valuable garbage can be, right? The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, that's impossible. If Dad owned an island, I would have known. The estate lawyers would have known. Dad didn't know. It's been in the family for centuries, passed down through a separate inheritance line. But Dad's will gave me everything in the attic, including the documentation for the island. It's mine, Marcus. We'll contest it. You can't possibly... Actually, I can, and I have. The claim has been validated. I own a 47-acre island off the Connecticut coast. Isn't that something? Marcus hung up on me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Word spread quickly through the family and their social circles. The daughter Robert Harrison had dismissed, the failure, the nobody. She had inherited something worth more than half of Marcus's inheritance, and she'd found it in the garbage he'd laughed at her for taking. The family meeting was called for a Friday evening at the Greenwich House. I arrived in my same old Honda, which I'd managed to get running again, parking it between Marcus's Bentley and Uncle Richard's Mercedes. The looks on their faces when I walked in were priceless, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. Marcus stood by the fireplace, trying to project authority. Elena, we need to discuss this situation. What situation? I asked, helping myself to Dad's expensive scotch from the bar. The situation where I own an island? That situation? It belongs to the family, Aunt Patricia said, to the Harrison legacy. Actually, it belongs to me. Captain Harrison was very specific in his will. The island passed through a separate line of inheritance, specifically to avoid it being absorbed into the family business. It's mine by right. You can't keep it, Marcus said. You don't have the resources to develop it, to maintain it. You need the family's help. I laughed. The family's help? Where was the family's help when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? Where was the family's help when I was sleeping in my car because I couldn't afford rent and tuition? Where was the family's help when Dad told me I wasn't worth investing in? That's different, Mom said quietly. Your father had his reasons. Yes, his reason was that I was born female, that I was born second, that I didn't fit his vision of what a Harrison should be. So this is revenge? Marcus stepped forward. You're going to keep the island out of spite? No, Marcus. I'm going to keep the island because it's mine. Because for once in my life, I have something you can't take away, can't diminish, can't mock. I have something valuable, and I found it in the garbage you all thought was worthless. Just like you thought I was worthless. Vivian spoke up, her voice dripping honey over poison. Elena, sweetie, you have to think practically. What are you going to do with an island? You can barely afford your apartment. The taxes alone are surprisingly manageable, actually. The nature preserve designation means significant tax breaks. And as for what I'm going to do with it, I paused, savoring the moment. I'm going to sell it. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, demanding, pleading, threatening. Marcus's face was purple with rage. You can't sell family property to strangers. Watch me. I already have 3 interested buyers, tech billionaires who want their own private island. The bidding starts at 20 million. 20 million? Mom's voice cracked. But that's almost as much as Marcus inherited. More, actually. When you factor in the taxes he'll have to pay on his inheritance. Mine, being property discovered through historical claim, has a different tax structure. I'll likely clear more than he will. Marcus lunged forward, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. Uncle Richard grabbed his arm. "You little bitch," Marcus snarled. "You think you've won something? You think this makes you important? You're still nothing. You're still the failure who couldn't even get Dad to pay for your education." "You're right," I said calmly. "I am the one Dad wouldn't pay for. I'm the one he ignored, dismissed, discarded. I'm the one whose achievements meant nothing, whose dreams were worthless, whose entire existence was an inconvenience. And I'm also the one who found a $20 million island in the junk you were going to throw in the garbage." I finished my scotch and set down the glass. "The sale will be finalized next month. I wanted you all to hear it from me first. Consider it a courtesy, more than any of you ever gave me." As I walked toward the door, Marcus called out, "Wait, I'll buy it. I'll give you the 20 million. I turned back. "You don't have 20 million, Marcus. You have 23 million minus taxes, minus the money you've already spent on that ridiculous yacht, minus what you're hemorrhaging trying to keep Dad's company afloat because, let's be honest, you don't have his business sense. You couldn't afford my island if you liquidated everything." "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is. It was over the moment Dad wrote his will. He thought he was giving me nothing, but he gave me everything. The telescope that led me to the island, the documents that proved my claim, and most importantly, the motivation to look for something more in what everyone else dismissed as worthless." I left them there in their stunned silence and drove home in my beat-up Honda, singing along to the radio at the top of my lungs. That night, I set up the telescope on my fire escape and pointed it toward where I now knew my island sat, hidden in the darkness of the Sound. The sale went through 6 weeks later. $24 million, cash, from a software developer who wanted to build an eco-friendly retreat. I donated $1 million to the planetarium where I worked, ensuring they could expand their education programs. I set up a scholarship fund for young women studying astronomy, the Elena Harrison Fund for Women in Science. Dad would have hated that his name was attached to it. I bought a small house in New Haven, nothing fancy, but mine. I kept working at the planetarium because I loved it, though now I could afford to work on the research projects that interested me without worrying about the salary. I even kept the old Honda for a while, just because the look on Marcus's face when I drove it to family events was priceless. But the best part was the letter I received from Marcus's lawyer 3 months after the sale. Harrison Industries was in trouble. Bad investments, overexpansion, the kind of mistakes that happen when someone inherits a position they're not qualified for. Marcus needed capital, and he was willing to sell me shares in the company. I bought them. Not enough to control anything, just enough to have a seat at the table. Just enough that Marcus had to see me at every board meeting, had to acknowledge me as an equal, had to watch as I voted against his worst ideas, and occasionally saved him from complete disaster. Because here's what I learned from that telescope and the island it revealed. Sometimes the most valuable things come disguised as worthless junk. Sometimes the person everyone dismisses is the one holding the treasure map. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's succeeding so thoroughly that they have to watch your rise from the audience they relegated you to. Aunt Patricia still whispers about how it isn't fair, how the island should have stayed in the proper family line. Vivian still makes snide comments about new money versus old money, as if her marriage to Marcus makes her more legitimate than my own earnings. Mom still can't quite look me in the eye, caught between pride in my success and shame at how she let Dad treat me. But Marcus knows the truth. Every time he sits across from me in those board meetings, every time he has to ask for my vote on a proposal, every time someone mentions the Harrison heiress who found a fortune in an old telescope, he knows. He had everything handed to him on a silver platter, and he's barely keeping it together. I had nothing but garbage, and I turned it into gold. The telescope sits in my home office now, restored to its full glory. I had it professionally cleaned and repaired, the brass polished until it gleams, the leather replaced with period-appropriate materials. It's worth about $50,000 as an antique, but to me, it's priceless. It's the reminder that being underestimated is not a weakness, it's a superpower. When people don't expect anything from you, they don't guard against you. They leave their treasures in plain sight, disguised as trash, never thinking you might be smart enough to recognize their value. I still use it sometimes, the regular eyepiece for stargazing, the special one for remembering. Through that hidden lens, I can still see the overlay of Captain Harrison's world on ours, the secret geography of hidden treasures and forgotten places. I found 3 more unclaimed parcels of land using his charts, though nothing as valuable as the island. I'm saving them for my children, if I ever have any. Let them have their own experience of finding treasure in what others discard. Last week was Dad's birthday. The family still gathers at his grave every year, a tradition Mom insists on maintaining. Marcus gave a speech about carrying on Dad's legacy, about honor and family and tradition. I stood in the back, as I always did when Dad was alive, and listened to him rewrite history, painting Dad as a visionary who built an empire. When he was done, I stepped forward and placed the telescope's original case on the grave. "What's that?" Marcus asked. "A thank you," I said, "for teaching me. That value isn't always obvious, for showing me that being dismissed can be a gift, for leaving me the telescope." "Dad didn't know about the island," Marcus said defensively. If he had known, he would have left it to you, and you would have sold it immediately to cover your debts, probably for a fraction of its value, because you wouldn't have done the research. You would have seen it as just another asset to liquidate. But because he didn't know, because he thought he was giving me worthless junk, I had to earn it. I had to solve the puzzle, do the work, prove the claim. The island wasn't really my inheritance. The hunt for it was. I looked at the headstone, at Dad's name carved in marble. Robert Harrison, 1951-2024, beloved father and husband. Nothing about being a good father or husband, just beloved. Even in death, his truth was dressed up in euphemisms. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, not really to Marcus, but to the stone, to Dad, to myself. I spent my whole life trying to get you to see my worth, trying to prove I was as good as Marcus, as deserving of love and respect and opportunity. But you never saw it because you weren't looking. You had decided my value the day I was born female, and nothing I did could change that equation in your mind. I touched the telescope case one last time, but Captain Harrison saw differently. He left that special lens for a reason. He knew that sometimes you need to look at the world from a different angle to see what's really there. The overlay doesn't show things that don't exist. It reveals things that were always there, but hidden by conventional sight. That's what I was to you, Dad. Hidden by your conventional sight. But I was always valuable. I was always worthy. I just needed the right lens to prove it. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, I'm not angry anymore," I interrupted. "I'm grateful. If you had valued me, if you had given me money and position and easy opportunities, I would have become another Marcus. Soft, entitled, coasting on inherited privilege. Instead, you made me earn everything. You made me strong. You made me resourceful. You accidentally gave me the greatest gift a parent can give a child, the necessity to become extraordinary." I walked away from the grave, leaving them all standing there. Mom called after me, something about family dinner, but I didn't stop. I had a board meeting to prepare for, A presentation about a new acquisition I'd identified, a small tech company Marcus thought was worthless, but that owned patents worth millions. He'd learn about it tomorrow when I presented it to the board, another piece of treasure he'd overlooked because he only knew how to see what was obvious. That's the thing about being the underestimated one, the dismissed one, the forgotten one. Everyone shows you their vulnerabilities because they don't think you're smart enough to notice or powerful enough to exploit them. They hand you weapons disguised as insults, opportunities disguised as obstacles, fortunes disguised as garbage. The telescope taught me that. Not just the island it revealed, but the principle it represented. That there are always two ways to see the world. The obvious way that everyone uses, and the hidden way that shows what's really there. Most people never find that second lens. They live their whole lives seeing only what they're told to see, valuing only what they're told to value. But some of us, the ones who've been told we're worthless, we have to find that second lens. We have to learn to see differently, because the conventional view doesn't include us. We have to find our own treasures because no one's going to hand them to us. 6 months after the island sale, I was invited to speak at Yale's graduation ceremony. The kid who couldn't get her father to pay for college, standing at the podium of one of the most prestigious universities in the world, telling the next generation how to find value in the unexpected. The irony was delicious. Everyone here has been given tremendous opportunities, I told them. You've got Yale on your resume, connections, knowledge, all the conventional markers of future success. But I want to talk to you about a different kind of opportunity. The opportunity of being underestimated. I told them about the telescope, about the island, about the family that thought I was worthless. But more than that, I told them about the power of looking where no one else is looking, of finding value in what others discard, of turning dismissal into motivation. Your Yale degree will open doors, I said, but the moments when doors are slammed in your face, those are the moments that will define you. Those are the moments when you'll have to decide whether to accept other people's valuation of your worth or to grab a telescope and look for islands everyone else has missed. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 19, wearing a second-hand dress and shoes that had been resoled more than once. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry and determined and tired of being overlooked. "Ms. Harrison," she said, "I'm Emily Chen. I'm a scholarship student here, first in my family to go to college. Everyone keeps telling me I'm lucky to be here, like I should just be grateful for the opportunity and not expect too much. But I want more than just to be allowed in the room. I want to own the room. How do I do that when I start with nothing?" I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing her a picture of the telescope. You don't start with nothing. You start with the advantage of being underestimated. Let me tell you what my father's garbage taught me about finding treasure. We talked for an hour. I gave her my card, told her to call me when she graduated. She's working for me now, helping to manage the investment fund I started with the island money. She's brilliant. Hungry. And everyone underestimates her because she doesn't look like money. She's found me 3 deals worth millions that Marcus's firm passed on because they couldn't see past the surface. That's my new business, actually. Finding the telescopes. Looking for the overlooked, the underestimated, the discarded. I've built a venture capital firm that specifically invests in companies founded by people like me, the ones nobody expected to succeed. We're worth $200 million now, after just 2 years. Marcus's company, the Great Harrison Industries, they're down to their last $50 million and bleeding money quarterly. He came to my office last month. Not the family patriarch anymore, just a desperate man in an expensive suit he could no longer afford. He sat across from my desk, mahogany like Dad's, but bought with my own money, and asked for a loan. "I know we've had our differences," he said, not quite able to meet my eyes. "But we're family. Dad would want you to succeed and me to fail," I interrupted. "Dad would be horrified that I have more money than you. Dad would be appalled that his precious son is begging his worthless daughter for help." "Elena, please." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. He looked old, older than his 31 years. The weight of failure had aged him in a way privilege never could. "I'll make you a deal," I said. "I'll buy Harrison Industries. Not loan you money, buy it outright. You'll get enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life, but you'll have to watch me run the company Dad never wanted me to touch." His face went through a series of emotions: rage, humiliation, desperation, and finally, resignation. "How much?" $5 million. $5 million. The company's worth at least 20. The company was worth 20 when Dad ran it. You've destroyed its value with bad decisions and worse management. $5 million is generous, and you know it. He did know it. He took the deal. The papers were signed a week later, with the whole family watching. I now owned Harrison Industries, the company I was never supposed to be smart enough to understand, successful enough to run, or important enough to inherit. The first thing I did was rename it Perpetua Industries, after Captain Harrison's ship. The second thing I did was hire Emily Chen as VP of Development. The third thing was to turn Dad's old office into a conference room and put the telescope on permanent display where his desk used to be. Marcus still works there, actually. I kept him on as a consultant, partly because he does know some aspects of the business, but mostly because I wanted him to come to work every day in the company his sister owns. He has a nice office, a good salary, and the constant reminder that the person he dismissed as worthless is now signing his paychecks. But here's the thing, I'm not cruel about it. I don't rub his face in it or make him grovel. I treat him with the professional respect I wish he'd shown me. Because the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. The family has slowly come around. Aunt Patricia now tells everyone how she always knew I was special. Cousin Jeffrey asks for investment advice. Mom has started calling me regularly, trying to build the relationship we never had. I accept it all graciously, but I don't forget. The telescope sits in my office as a reminder that these people only see my value now because it's become too obvious to ignore. Vivian divorced Marcus last year. Turns out she was only interested in the Harrison heir when he was rich. She tried to befriend me after the divorce, showing up at my office with expensive coffee and fake sympathy, talking about how we girls need to stick together. I listened to her pitch. She wanted funding for a lifestyle brand, and then had security escort her out. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, no matter how much someone claims they've changed their perspective. Last month, I had the island photographed for a documentary about hidden treasures in America. Standing on its shores, looking back at the Connecticut coastline, I thought about Captain Harrison and his secret. For 2 centuries, that island waited for someone to find it, to see its value, to claim it. It could have been any Harrison heir along the way, but they were all too busy looking at the obvious wealth to notice the hidden fortune. That's what privilege does. It makes you lazy. When you're handed everything, you never learn to look for anything. When you're told you're valuable from birth, you never develop the skills to prove it. When every door opens for you, you never learn to build your own doors. But those of us who start with nothing, who are told we are nothing, we learn to see differently out of necessity. We develop echolocation in the dark, finding walls and openings by the echo of our own determination. We become archaeologists of opportunity, digging through layers of rejection to find the treasures buried beneath. The documentary producer asked me what advice I'd give to young women who feel overlooked and undervalued. I thought about it for a long time, standing there on my island. Well, the software developer's island now, but it would always be mine in the ways that mattered. Find your telescope, I finally said. Find the thing that helps you see what others miss. It might be education, it might be persistence, it might be a skill everyone thinks is worthless until you prove otherwise. But find it, use it, and never apologize for seeing more than people expect you to see. And if they still don't see your value? She asked. I smiled, thinking of Dad's grave, of Marcus's humiliation, of the family that had dismissed me now courting my favor. Then make your value so undeniable that their blindness becomes their loss, not yours. Build something. So magnificent that they have to acknowledge it, even if they never acknowledge you. And remember, being underestimated is not a burden. It's a superpower. Use it. The documentary aired last week. Marcus texted me afterward, just 2 words. Well played. I texted back, thanks for laughing at the telescope. He didn't respond, but I knew he understood. Every triumph I had, every success I achieved, every dollar I earned could be traced back to that moment in the lawyer's office when he laughed at my inheritance. His mockery had been the match that lit the fire. His dismissal had been the fuel that kept it burning. But here's the secret Marcus will never understand. The thing the telescope really taught me. I was never worthless. None of us are. We're all islands hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right lens to see our value. The tragedy isn't that some of us go undiscovered. The tragedy is that we wait for others to discover us instead of grabbing a telescope and discovering ourselves. I found my island because I was forced to look for it, because I had no other choice, because the conventional inheritance was denied to me, so I had to find the unconventional one. But how many people live their whole lives never knowing they're standing on buried treasure? How many accept the valuation others place on them without question? The telescope sits in my office, and every day someone asks about it. I tell them the story, the will, the island, the reversal of fortune. But I also tell them what I've learned since, that there are islands everywhere, hidden in plain sight. In overlooked companies, in dismissed ideas, in underestimated people. You just need the right lens to see them. Emily found one last week, a small biotech firm everyone had written off because their first drug trial failed. But she looked deeper, saw that their research platform had applications no one else had considered. We bought it for $2 million. It'll be worth $50 million within 3 years. That's what I've built with my inheritance. Not just wealth, but a different way of seeing. A company that looks for value where others see garbage. A fund that invests in the underestimated. A legacy that says worth isn't determined by birth order or gender or conventional metrics of success. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would think if he could see me now. Would he be proud? Horrified? Would he finally see my value, or would he find new ways to dismiss it? I'll never know, and honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. His opinions stopped defining me the day I picked up that telescope and started looking for myself. But I do know what Captain Harrison would think. I found a letter from him tucked into the telescope case, so old the paper crumbled at the edges. It was addressed, "To whoever finds my island," and it said, "If you are reading this, you have looked beyond the obvious and seen what generations before you missed. The island is yours, but more importantly, the lesson is yours. There is always more than what appears. There is always treasure in what others discard. There is always value in looking where no one else thinks to look. May you use this knowledge to find not just one island, but many. May you see the world not as it appears, but as it truly is, full of hidden wonders waiting to be discovered." He signed it with a phrase in Latin, "Qui audet adipicitur," who dares, wins. I had it engraved on a plaque that now sits next to the telescope. Every morning when I come into my office, I see those words and remember. I dared to look through the telescope. I dared to claim the island. I dared to value myself when no one else would. And I won. Not just the money, not just the company, not just the validation. I won the knowledge that my worth was never dependent on anyone else's ability to see it. I won the freedom that comes from turning rejection into motivation. I won the power that comes from being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. The Harrison family fortune is mine now in every way that matters. Not because I inherited it, but because I earned it. Not because it was given to me, but because I found it in the garbage they tried to throw away, not because I was chosen, but because I chose myself. And that telescope? It still works perfectly. Sometimes on clear nights, I take it up to the roof of my building and look at the stars. With the regular lens, I see what everyone sees: distant lights, ancient history, the vast universe that makes us all feel small. But with the special lens, the hidden one, I see something else. Possibilities, opportunities, undiscovered islands of potential floating in the dark, waiting for someone brave enough to chart a course to them. That's my real inheritance, not the island, not the money, not even the company. It's the ability to see what others miss, to find value in the discarded, to know that being underestimated is just another word for being undervalued, and that value exists whether others see it or not. Marcus still doesn't understand. He thinks I got lucky, that I stumbled onto fortune through coincidence. He doesn't realize that luck had nothing to do with it. I found that island because I was the only one looking for it. Because I was the only one who needed to find it. Because when you have nothing, you learn to see everything. The last time we had dinner as a family, Mom asked me if I was happy. It was the first time she'd ever asked me that question, with genuine interest in the answer. Yes, I said, I'm happy. Even though Dad never... She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Especially because Dad never, I corrected. His rejection was the greatest gift he could have given me. It taught me to find my own worth instead of waiting for someone else to assign it to me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I should have stood up for you. I should have fought for you. No, I said, and meant it. If you had fought for me, I never would have learned to fight for myself. If you had made him see my value, I never would have discovered it on my own. Every door that closed pushed me toward the one that would change everything. The telescope was waiting for me, Mom. It had been waiting for over 200 years. It just needed someone desperate enough to look through it differently. That's the truth I've learned, the one the telescope taught me. Desperation breeds innovation. Rejection creates resilience. Being undervalued is just life's way of teaching you to appraise yourself. I'm teaching a course at Yale now, funded by my donation. It's called Hidden Value, the Art of Seeing Differently. 300 students applied for 25 spots. I chose the 25 who had been rejected from other programs, who had the lowest family incomes, who had the most to prove and the least to lose. On the first day of class, I brought in the telescope. This is worth $50,000 as an antique, I told them, but it revealed something worth $24 million. The difference between those two numbers is the difference between seeing what's obvious and seeing what's possible. This class is about learning to see what's possible. One student raised her hand. But how do you know where to look? I smiled, remembering my own confusion, my own desperate searching through dusty boxes and old papers. You look where no one else is looking. You value what no one else values. You dig through the garbage of conventional wisdom to find the treasures of unconventional thinking. And most importantly, you never, ever accept someone else's assessment of your worth. Even if that someone is your parent? Another student asked, and I heard my own young voice in hers. Especially if that someone is your parent. Parents are just people with their own limitations, their own blind spots, their own inability to see past conventional lenses. They can love you and still not see your value. They can provide for you and still underestimate you. They can leave you everything and give you nothing, or leave you nothing and give you everything. I held up the telescope. My father thought he was leaving me garbage. He was actually leaving me the key to a kingdom he didn't even know existed. Your job is to find your own key, your own kingdom, your own telescope that shows you what everyone else misses. After class, I stood in my office, looking out at New Haven. Somewhere out there, another young woman was being told she wasn't enough. Somewhere, another dreamer was being dismissed as impractical. Somewhere, another fortune was sitting in an attic, waiting to be discovered. The telescope caught the afternoon light, brass gleaming like gold, which in a way it was. Alchemists spent centuries trying to turn lead into gold, never realizing the real transformation was simpler: turn blindness into sight, rejection into motivation, garbage into treasure. I picked up my phone and called Emily. I want you to start a new project. We're going to fund a team whose only job is to go through estate sales and abandoned storage units, looking for things like the telescope. Hidden deeds, forgotten claims, overlooked patents. We're going to find every island that's been waiting for someone to discover it. That could take years, Emily said, and most of it will be worthless. Most of it will be worthless to people who only see the obvious value, but we see differently, don't we? Yes, she said, and I heard the smile in her voice. We do. That's my empire now, not just Perpetua Industries, not just the venture fund, but an entire ecosystem built on the principle the telescope taught me. There is always more than what appears. Every underestimated entrepreneur we fund, every overlooked opportunity we develop, every discarded asset we revive is a testament to that principle. Marcus asked me once if I ever forgive Dad for how he treated me. The question surprised me because forgiveness implies I'm still hurt, still angry, still defined by his rejection. But I'm not. I'm grateful, not for the pain. Pain is never something to be grateful for, but for the outcome, for the person that pain forced me to become. If Dad had loved me the way he loved Marcus, I would be Marcus, soft, entitled, crumbling under the weight of inherited expectation. Instead, I'm Elena Harrison, the woman who found a $24 million island in a box of garbage. The woman who built an empire from rejection. The woman who learned that being underestimated is just another form of being underpriced, and that the market always corrects itself eventually. The telescope still works, by the way. I had it checked by an expert who specializes in antique maritime equipment. He was amazed by the hidden eyepiece, said he'd never seen anything like it. The overlay function was created using a combination of specially ground lenses and etched glass, a technique that was revolutionary for its time and lost to history. Your ancestor was a genius, he told me. This wasn't just for navigation. This was for seeing hidden patterns, for revealing what was deliberately concealed. Pirates used similar devices to find buried treasure, but this is far more sophisticated. Hidden patterns. Revealing what was concealed. That's what I do now, in every aspect of my business. I look for the patterns others miss, reveal the value others conceal, find the islands others don't know exist. And there are so many islands. Last week I found another one. Not a literal island this time, but a patent filed in 1962 for a process everyone thought was obsolete. Except it wasn't obsolete. It was just waiting for modern technology to catch up to its vision. We bought the patent rights for $5,000. IBM just offered us $10 million for it. That's the thing about garbage. It's only garbage until someone figures out what it's really worth. And that's the thing about being underestimated. It only hurts until you realize it's actually your greatest advantage. When everyone expects you to fail, you can take risks without scrutiny. When everyone dismisses your efforts, you can build in secret. When everyone thinks you're worthless, you can buy value for pennies on the dollar. The Harrison family reunion is next month. It'll be held at the Greenwich Estate, which I now own, having bought it from Mom when she decided to downsize. I'm thinking about displaying the telescope in the main hall, right where Dad's portrait used to hang. Not as a trophy or a taunt, but as a reminder. A reminder that value isn't inherited, it's discovered. That worth isn't assigned, it's proven. That the difference between garbage and treasure is just perspective. Marcus will hate it, but he'll smile and bear it because he needs this job. The rest of the family will whisper about how unfair it all is, how the wrong Harrison ended up with everything. And I'll stand there, the girl who wasn't worth educating, the daughter who didn't matter, the heir to garbage, and I'll know the truth. I didn't end up with everything. I started with nothing and built everything. There's a difference. The telescope showed me that difference. It showed me that there are two worlds, the one everyone sees and the one waiting to be discovered. Most people live their entire lives in the first world, accepting its limitations, its valuations, its judgments. But a few of us, the desperate ones, the rejected ones, the underestimated ones. We find the hidden eyepiece. We see the second world, the one full of islands and treasures and possibilities that exist in the spaces others ignore. I was 24 when I inherited that telescope. I'm 26 now, and I'm worth more than my father ever was, in every currency that matters. But the real measure of my success isn't in dollars or companies or conquered siblings. It's in the fact that I no longer need anyone else to see my value for it to exist. The telescope taught me that. It showed me how to look at myself through a different lens, one that reveals rather than conceals, one that magnifies rather than diminishes. That's what I want everyone to understand. Your worth is not determined by your family's opinion, your society's prejudices, or your circumstances' limitations. Your worth is inherent, waiting to be discovered, probably hidden in the last place anyone would think to look. You just need to find your telescope, your special lens, your way of seeing what others miss. Mine came in a dusty box in an attic, dismissed as garbage by everyone who mattered. Yours might come differently. A chance encounter, a random book, a conversation with a stranger, a failure that teaches you to succeed. But it will come if you're looking for it, if you're desperate enough to see differently, if you're brave enough to value what others discard. The island was never really the treasure. The telescope was never really the gift. The real inheritance was the lesson, that being underestimated is not a curse but a concealment, not a limitation but a liberation, not an ending but an invitation to write your own beginning. I think Captain Harrison knew that. I think that's why he created the hidden eyepiece, why he kept the island secret, why he passed it down through the younger line. He knew that the ones who inherit everything never learn to find anything, but the ones who inherit nothing, we learn to find everything. That's my story. The girl who got the garbage and found the gold. The daughter who was dismissed and became the dynasty. The underestimated one who understood that estimation is just opinion, and opinions can be wrong. The telescope sits in my office, pointing toward the window, toward the sound, toward the place where my island once waited through centuries for someone to see it. I don't need it anymore to find treasures. I've learned to see them without it. But I keep it as a reminder, a talisman, a symbol of the day my life changed, because I was willing to look through a different lens. If you're reading this, if you've ever been the overlooked one, the dismissed one, the one who got the garbage while others got the gold, I want you to know something. Your telescope is out there. Your island exists. Your treasure is waiting. You just have to be willing to look where no one else is looking, to value what no one else values, to see what no one else sees. And when you find it, because you will find it if you keep looking, remember this moment. Remember when you thought you were worthless. Remember when they laughed at your inheritance. Remember when you almost believed them. Then hold up your telescope, whatever form it takes, and look through it at the world that dismissed you. See how small their vision was. See how limited their perspective. See how much they missed because they were too busy looking at the obvious to notice the extraordinary. That's your real inheritance, not what they give you, but what you find despite them. Not what they value, but what you discover they overlooked. Not their estimation of your worth, but your revelation of your value. The telescope taught me that. The island proved it. And every day since, I've lived it. Who dares, wins. And I dared to look through the telescope everyone thought was garbage. And I won everything. Even Marcus knows it now. Especially Marcus. But this was never really about Marcus, or Dad, or the family that underestimated me. This was about me learning to estimate myself. This was about discovering that the only inheritance that matters is the one you give yourself, the gift of seeing your own value, even when, especially when, no one else does. The telescope still points toward the sound, toward the horizon, toward possibilities, yet to be discovered. Because there are always more islands. There are always more treasures. There are always more ways to see the world than the one we're taught. You just need the right lens, and the courage to look through it, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is to be given the garbage, because that's where all the best treasures are hidden. Trust me, I have the telescope to prove it. End. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe into the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.